Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first edition of Learn and Pull Live online for 2016. So we have a great show out for today's. Our ADAPT webinars keep getting more popular and popular. We have Bob Price on this morning, joined by Ashley Stanton and many more. So today we're going to show you how to design and build impactful branching scenarios in ADAPT. So it's an exciting time for ADAPT as we build more for the roadmap for 2016 with the stacker component and this branching scenario we're going to show this morning. And joining us is the lovely Head of Content, Lindsey Coode, and our Academy Manager, Kevin Doherty. Both Lindsey and Kevin have been involved with ADAPT since its inception and are major contributors to the tools in terms of content and expertise. So this morning's session should last approximately 40 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity for you to interact throughout. There'll be a couple of quick polls for you to cast your vote, and down the right hand side you'll also see a question box. Feel free to pop your questions in there and we'll do our best to answer those online. So without further ado, let's kick off. And how I'm going to kick off is with a short poll. So we're trying to get a feel here of how people rate their experience of building scenarios into your e-learning already. Maybe it's something that you do on a regular basis, or something maybe that you're toying with at the minute and seeing how it can factor in. Or maybe you're a newbie to scenarios and you're just online this morning to see how branching can bring another factor, another element to your e-learning. So we have an interesting results here. Let's give you a few more seconds. So I'll just share the results and I'll just ask Kevin here to contribute.
Yeah, so some interesting results there. We've about an even split on people that haven't used scenarios at all. Almost half of the audience haven't, and half of them are either occasionally using it or using it on a regular basis. I think that just goes to show just how common scenarios are becoming in e-learning and how vital and useful they can be within the e-learning as well. We do have about half of people already using them. Hopefully now after today we'll be able to start getting to use it within the ADAPT builder as well.
That's great, Kevin. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop you over now to Lindsey, and Lindsey's going to give an introduction generally to ADAPT and also the importance of scenarios. So that's you, Lindsey.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I've got a slight frog in my throat, so I apologise, but hopefully I'll manage to get through this bit without too much trouble. So as Lisa says, we're going to be looking at kind of branching scenarios in this. This has come about because hopefully most of you are familiar with ADAPT, but one of our newest components is the branching component. It can be used in a number of different ways, really, but we think the main use that people will find for it is probably in kind of trying to put your learners into a situation and allowing them to make decisions. So that's kind of what we're referring to as branching scenarios. Other ways that you might want to use it is in process flows. You might want to use it if you've got a set of instructions that people need to carry out and check that they can do them in that way and show them the consequences if not, and things like that. So there is other ways of using that component, but this is the one that we're finding we're using it for most, so we just thought we'd talk through that a little bit. So when we asked the question about scenarios up front, I don't know kind of how people took that really, but I think a lot of people use scenarios in their e-learning even before the branching component. You can put people in a situation and get them to think things through without actually having to take them through a branching kind of format. So, for example, in sorry, excuse me, in a lot of our social care courses, and in fact in a lot of our courses generally, we have kind of case studies and stories, and we ask people to think about what they would do in a particular situation and try and put them in that kind of environment so that they can really think things through. But the reason we do that is because scenarios are so effective to helping people learn. The reasons for that, as I've got listed here, is that they engage people. People love a good story. It's why gossip and soap operas and all that kind of things are so popular. We all have an interest in what other people are doing, how other people's lives are going, and all that kind of thing. So that just being able to kind of see how stuff works in real life is really important in a learning situation. What it also allows learners to do is to apply knowledge to a practical situation. So often in an e-learning module, you'll be kind of giving people information, you'll be giving them tips and hints in how they can improve their performance and things like that. And then you can use scenarios to kind of either highlight that and bring it to life, or in the case of branching scenarios, actually let them try it out. That also helps with reinforcement. So you're giving the information, you're then allowing them to try it. And as we all know, the best way to learn is actually doing it yourself. So that's why they're so effective. And also it allows people to practice in a safe environment, particularly if people aren't that confident. It might be that they're not sure of how they would deal with that, particularly say if it was a customer service scenario and they maybe got an angry customer on the phone. It allows them to kind of try out different answers and see what the impact might be. Okay, so whether you're thinking, oh, I love writing stories, or I've never written a story in my life and I don't think I'd like it, you probably have. You probably did it at school if you haven't done it since then. So writing scenarios is really about writing stories. It's creative writing, as it used to be called in my day when I was at school. Obviously, we're looking in this format at a bit more structure. We're looking to get a particular learning point across. But it really comes down to the same thing. And I think lots of the instructional designers, I know certainly a lot of the people in my team, it's actually one of their favourite parts of writing for e-learning courses, is really kind of going to town in kind of these scenario situations. So just some ideas on how to write good scenarios. If it is something that you struggle with, I know that some people will just be able to sit down and write them off the top of their head. But actually there's a number of things that you can consider that just give you a bit more structure to it. So first of all, you can kind of, I guess, be first or a bit interchangeable really, set the scene or choose your characters. It's likely that if you're a subject matter expert, you will know a typical kind of situation that someone might find themselves in, and that makes it a bit easier. As instructional designers who aren't subject matter experts, it's often a bit trickier. But then in that instance, you can work closely with your subject matter expert, have a conversation with them, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone, and start trying to kind of flesh out what a likely scenario would be. So particularly if you're doing extended scenarios, it's useful to really kind of choose your characters up front. Make sure you know all the key players in your story, and also the scene, what's going on, where they are, what situation they're in, maybe any background information that you need to know. The challenge is kind of where you're trying to get the learning point across. So this is probably the bit where it could go wrong, along with kind of considering the conflict. So thinking about how this might kind of pan out. What we tend to recommend is that you work on the resolution first. So almost take the ideal path through your scenario. In an ideal world, how would it work? And you can then look at that's kind of your best practice solution, and then you can look at other ways, other paths that you could take through it. So for example, when it comes to the first question, this will make more sense when you see Kevin put it into Adapt Itself, but you might have your best response, so kind of your best practice response, and then one that's not obviously wrong, but just that might have other implications. So it's thinking about kind of trying to be quite clever about how you write it so that it's not really obvious which the path is to go through. The last point I've got here is rewriting. I think that's really important, particularly if you're not that confident, because actually the best thing to do is just to write it. Just get on and do it, whether you do it in Word first, whether you do it in a tool, or whether you kind of just sit there and write it by hand or things like that. Just get it written down, because you can rewrite it. The beauty of digital media is that you can keep changing it until you're happy with it. It's not kind of set in stone until you publish it. And to be honest, even then, as long as you're not changing the number of components, you can still edit it and improve it if you want to. Okay, so that's kind of writing stories. There's an awful lot more you can say on it, but really it does just come down to practicing, look at other examples, and just try and get some ideas from those kind of things. If people are interested, we can probably do a bit more on this in a future webinar as well in terms of the actual writing of them. Just before I hand over to Kevin, I wanted to show you a tool that I discovered recently that I found really useful. It's called Trinary. It's a free open source tool. There's a couple of options of how you use it. You can download it, but I've actually just been using it online. If you can see my cursor here, I'm going to click through now. And what it allows you to do is basically, this is a kind of a branching scenario that I set up previously. So you can see it's kind of got a flowchart style to it. So this is where I started. If I double click on this one, you can see that I've put in quite a bit of information up here, and basically for any of your options, all you do is put 2 square brackets at the front, 2 square brackets at the end, and then you do the same for subsequent options, and you can have as many options as you like. When you're starting out, I probably recommend keeping it to a couple, and then look at how many layers you have, because obviously it's quite easy to go from 2 to 4 to 8. And it can end up quite big, so it's just thinking about kind of the best, trying to kind of contain it a little bit, I guess. So what then happens is when you put these little square brackets in, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but they go blue, they then create another box. So these are your branches, effectively. If I then click on one of those, you can see they work in exactly the same way. So you take your scenario forward, and you can add in some more branching, and then that comes down to here, so you can see there's different ways. One of the things that I've done in this one, which I think works quite nicely and makes things feel a bit more real, this is a situation where somebody is in a customer service centre in a council, and kind of it's just showing what has happened and what repercussions there are. But what I have done is where they've not made the best choice, I've actually given them a chance to be able to bring it back. So we're not kind of saying, right, your first response wasn't right, so therefore you kind of bail out, and that's the end, you haven't succeeded. We do actually give them an opportunity to try and recover the situation. You can see here, if I just scroll up a bit, actually if they make 2 bad decisions, they do come to the end. If I just click on this, so you can see Becky has had enough of me and my level of customer service, and kind of basically walks out quite disappointed in the experience that she's had. But if there's one bad one, then they can kind of loop back round. So it's just quite an easy way of testing it out, and you can also choose to play it. So again, you can just see what happens. So you take your make your responses. So that was my first one. I'll do the one where I kind of fail first of all. So that's your where we've done it really badly. So that's where I've made 2 kind of not best practice choices. So I've just gone back 1. So now I'm at where I've made 1 kind of not best choice, and then I'm just going to click on the slightly better one, which is where I ask her to take a seat and try and be a bit more helpful than I was initially. And then you can see that takes it back round, so that now I can continue on and hopefully have a successful outcome on that. But yeah, it's just quite a useful way if you're struggling to visualize kind of where your branching scenario is going, to be able to look at it. So it's just a useful tool. So that's it from me for now. I am going to hand over to Kevin, and he'll be talking you through how you can actually then put that into the Adapt Builder. Okay, Kevin, that should be with you.
That's great, Lindsey. Thank you very much. I'm just going to pass over to Kevin now. Just bear with me a second, guys.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to take you through now the actual building of the branching scenario within Adapt. And now, as Lindsey has already shown you there, we've looked at Trinary and basically the way the story is laid out there. And essentially the best part about that is that it's a nice framework for us to start building this branching scenario, as you'll see on the edit screen now in a few moments. So I've just set up a course here, and I'm just going to add the new branching component to that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the branching component at full width. So just click on Add. Now, it is possible to add this as a left or right align component. Now, that is half width. we would advise probably do full width. The main reason being is that there's quite a lot of content that's going to be shown on screen. So if we do it at half width, you're kind of going to be crunching a lot of information in the one small area. So we would definitely recommend using the full width component. Now when we go into the branching component, it's very similar to all of the other components when you first open it. We have our main screen with the title, display title, and the body text. So these are the three default fields that will appear in all of our Adapt components. I'm just going to put in some information here. I've just got the title in. I'm just going to put in some instructional text here. I'm just going to correct that. So what I'm going to do first then, after we've set up those three initial fields, as you can see, there's quite a lot of options within the branching component, and we'll come to all these options down here after we start the initial build. So in order to actually add our first scenario, we just need to click on Edit Items, which will redirect you then to this screen. Now this is the main editing screen for the branching component. When we build it out, you'll see that it is quite similar to how you can lay this out in Trinary in order to kind of get your head around your scenario. So by default, the first item will be in here, and what we want to do is just click on the edit icon on the top left, which will open up our options on the left-hand side. Now, for our initial opening element to the scenario, what we want to do is to scroll down to the item narrative body. So the item narrative body is, as it suggests, it's a narrative, so it's the opening element of the story. So I have some text here that I've pre-written, and I'm just going to add this in for that body field. And so this is just the initial setting the scene of the scenario. Now, the way in which the Adapt branching component works is that on each level, you basically prompt them with the scenario and the question, and the next level is where you add the answers, as we're going to show you now in a moment. So now that we've got the item narrative body in, we want to add the actual question element where we're asking to make a choice, which is just the item stem. So I'm just going to select the best response below. So initially the scenario is just that Becky and her sons, Josh and Adam, live in a house rented from a private landlord. She's lost her job and goes to the housing office to see if she can claim any benefit. She approaches your desk and explains the situation. And then what we want to do is present two options. One is to say, as you're renting privately, we can't help you here. You need to go to the benefits office, which is over the other side of town. Or alternatively, as you're renting privately, you need to go to the benefits office, which is over the other side of town. Let me just give them a call to see if I can get you an appointment. So essentially, this question in itself is all based around customer service. So now that we have our item narrative body and our item stem in, we can ignore all of these other settings, and we can just click on Done, and that's the initial setup of the scenario completed. So I'm just going to set that up just as text for now. I'm going to add the question elements underneath that. So to add your actual selectable answer, we just click on Add Item, which adds the second level, and we click on the Edit screen. Now to put your answer in, it must go in under the Item Text field, which is just down here. Just going to pop the item text in. Now, if a user selects that, then what we want to do is we want to provide them with a scenario that branches off from there. So after we've added our item text, for this item, we'll also add our item narrative body. So the item narrative body will only be seen if a user selects this on their branching. And if they do select that, we then want to basically let them continue on through the branching and complete that. So we have, as I say, we have our item text in, which is the answer to our first question. Then we have our item narrative body, which is what they'll see if they select this. And what we also have to add here is the item stem, which is just the question then that leads on to the next stage of the scenario. So I'm just going to scroll down and click on Done. And then I'm just going to add a second item so that off of our first branch, there's actually a second option that can be selected. Now don't worry, I'm sure you're probably seeing a lot of these other fields and wondering what they're doing. I'm going to take you through each of those in a few moments as well. So I'm just going to get the initial setup here. So I'm just going to go down to item text, again, which is our answer to that first scenario. And then if they select that, we're going to add a new item narrative body. And then finally, we'll add our item stem. And I'm just going to give you a quick preview to let you see how this looks now before we've completely finished it. I'm just going to preview this and let you see what it looks like on the initial setup. So to save this, we just click on Close in the top right, which will save these items for you. And then click on Save on the component on the left-hand side. And then if we just preview this, we'll have just a very basic scenario with the information there explaining all about Becky and her sons. And then we have the item stem, select the best response from below. And then we also have our 2 options where we can select from. Now, because we've only set this up now, this is going to end the scenario when we do this, but we would continue on and add other elements there. So I'm just going to choose the option where we're basically just telling her it's on the other side of the town. So at the moment, you'll see it does just end there. It doesn't present us with the item narrative body. The reason for that is just we haven't then continued on and created the rest of that branching scenario. So what we would do there normally is continue and add further options under each of those. But as I say, we're not going to go through all of that today. I'm going to quickly jump over to a version of this that we've already built. And if we click on Edit Items, you can see this was our initial one where we advise who Becky is, what her situation is. Then we have the 2 options under here. And under each option, we then continue down and provide further options on each basic branch of this scenario. Now, as I mentioned before, there were quite a lot of other fields within the actual items themselves. So I'm just going to give you a quick look at something we've added in here that I skipped over last time. So under Media, you then have the option for Item Media Audio, Item Media Graphic, or Item Media MP4. So basically what you can do is for each branch of your scenario, you can add either audio, graphic, or a video file. Now you can add those to every single layer of that, so you can have multiple videos appearing throughout your course or images along with the scenario. Someone did ask about that, so just to make you aware, it is fully available within the builder that you can add videos, audio, or graphics if you wish. Now again, that's entirely if you wish. You don't need them. It's not like some other components where they are required. This is a fully optional field. So you can add those media items. Now, if you were to add a video, we also have this option for should wait for media to finish. Now, what that is that if you want someone to watch your video and you don't want them to see the question, because obviously if they see the question beforehand, they'll be looking out specifically for that answer. So you can change should wait for media to finish to true. That would mean they won't see the question. They'll have to sit through the full video and then they'll be presented with a question. So, one moment, I'm just going to show you now a preview of this course with the images put in there and the further branches on this scenario. So, let's be a few moments. Okay, so as you can see, we still have just that initial setup of Becky and her sons, except we've just added this image below, and then we have the option to select the answers on the right. So if we take the option where we just tell her to go over to the other side of town to do it, we then get the further elements there branching. So Becky's quite frustrated. She's been waiting for quite a while. At what point, what do you do at this stage? Tell her to take a seat. She'll give them a call and see if there's another way, or just advise her that we're separate offices. So in the interest of branching and just kind of learning by doing wrong, we're just going to say, we're really sorry, but that's just the way it is. At this point, we frustrated the customer. She's quite annoyed, and then it will take us to the end of the scenario, and we'll have the breakdown of answers. So the breakdown of answers just essentially sums up every option you selected as you've gone through the scenario. And I think this is where branching and scenarios kind of become really interesting for users, because it means they can go down the wrong path, they can see the wrong choices they've made, but then we give them the option so that they can either reset the last option and try answering the other available options, or they can reset the whole question and go back and start again and take them through it. So as you can see, I'm just going to show you here, we've used images on some of them, and then on others we haven't used any images. So as I say, if you use those items, if you use any media within the items, you are free to use them as and when you want. You don't need to use one in each branch, but if you wish, you can do that. So I'm just going to go back in here. Now, I'm going to take you down to the end of the branch and show you what we've done just to provide some feedback. So if we go into this last item, so this is where one of our branches ends. If we click on the item to edit it, you will see that this feedback text up at the top we have filled in. Now the feedback text you would only really use if you're actually reaching the end of your branch. so that's the text that will appear no matter what. When they select this option, they will get that feedback text. So there are two ways of doing that. One is you can present it on the end of your branch, or alternatively, if you leave your feedback text blank, what you can do is you can add scores for every item. So as the user goes through each item, they may get 1 point for one answer, 0 points for another, and at the very end then that can be tallied up and they'll be presented with a score. Now if you've done a score, you then have these feedback items options. So you can add actually scored feedback for specific bands. So you can add the minimum score, so if it was between from 0 to 5, you put 0 in the minimum, 5 in the maximum, then you can enter the text you'd like them to see. And then again, if you want to use media, so if there's audio, a graphic, or video feedback you want them to see, you can add them in at this level. It's entirely up to you what way you want to do this. If you want to provide them with a score, certainly if there's multiple paths and some of them will have correct answers as well as incorrect answers as you reach down through it, you may want to provide that score. The only issue I would advise is that they may achieve the same score throughout the component, so it's not necessarily going to be able to give them specific feedback based on the choices they've made. Whereas if you use the actual feedback text, then you know the path they've gone through to get here, so you can customize that feedback text based on the choices that they've made. So I'm just going to scroll down here as well and look at some of the rest of the options. So there are 3 other options on this one. There's use item as a bridge. So if you wanted to say start off one scenario and you get about halfway down and then it moves on to another scenario, but that initial one, that middle section you don't want to use, you can use that as a bridge where you can just present them with some feedback and then it'll move on from there, and you can just do that by setting this to true. The show item results breakdown. So that's once you reach the end of your scenario, you have this breakdown of answers. If you wish, you can remove certain items from that by just setting this to false. That will then take that out, so you would only have, if we did it in question 2, we would only see the breakdown for question 1 and question 3. Question 2's breakdown would be left out if you wanted to do that. And finally, there's the option to retry the hide button. So if you hide the retry button, it just means when they get to the end of the scenario, it's complete. There's no way for them to go back and reset that. So we just put that in there if you want them just to get it through on their first attempt. But as I say, there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that by giving them the option to go back and reset that and try it again, it kind of gives them a more broad overview of the situation and lets them kind of make mistakes themselves or correct the mistakes. So it just gives them the freedom to fully explore the situation. So on our scenario, I'm just going to reset this and show you. So currently we've got it set up so that the text appears at the top, the image appears underneath, and then on the right we have our question. So if we come out of the editing screen here, we do have a few options that allow us to play about with that display as well. So we have the option to display the narrative text above the media, which I've set to true. However, if we set that to false, then it means we can see the image at the top and the scenario text would appear underneath. And then the answers to the question will still appear on the right. Or alternatively, we can change the display media, narrative, and options full width. So if we set that to true, click on save, I'm just going to click preview here. What that'll do, so you may notice some blur in this image because this image was designed for a half width component, but we're going to span it to full width now. So when we go in, it means we get the scenario at the top, introducing us to Becky again. We get our large image, and then we have the question here. So as we answer each one, it'll jump us to the top. And it's just basically another way to lay out that scenario. And as we go through each one, we'll then get the breakdown of answers on a full width screen as well. Now, one other thing I'm just going to show you here is that there's an option for display media controls. Now, for this specific example, this wouldn't really apply because we're only using images on our scenario. If you were using audio and video and you want to prevent your users from skipping to the end of the video, you want to make sure they watch it, then we can set this to false, which will mean that the video or audio controls do not display on the actual content. They would have to sit and listen to it all. If you want to provide them the option to use the controls, then you can set that to true. The only downside I would say if you do set it to false is if a user's going through the scenario and somebody asks them a question in the meantime, then that may obviously prevent them from picking up on a piece of information, so they have no way of pausing it. But again, they can always go back and restart the video. It is an excellent way of just ensuring that they are fully compliant with the full component and do view everything on there as well. So finally as well, I'm just going to go through the breakdown of your answers. So we have this option which says breakdown of your answers. It tells you what you have for each item, question 1, question 2, question 3, says what you answered with. All of that text is defaulted in here, so you'll have the label for the answer breakdown as breakdown of your answers, the label for the answer you answered with, the label for the question, and the label for the reset button. Those are all free text entry fields, so you can update those and change them as you wish, but as I say, they will come through defaulted to those options. So I think that really covers the actual practical element of building out the branching scenario, and I think most of you will probably pick this up by actually practically doing it. I think that's the easiest way to get your head around it. And I know someone had previously asked us as well if we would be sharing any examples, and I can say we do have 2 examples on there that we will make available to you within the builder. One is basically understanding its app components, and it's just one that shows off the actual component and has like a little mini branching scenario in there that you can then go in and actually look at the editing screen and more closely examine just the nature of the way this is built. Now, one main thing I would advise you to take away from today is how the actual branching is set up initially. So in the first part, you enter your actual narrative scenario and you enter the question, but then it's only when you get down to the levels below that in the item text you add your actual answers that the user can select. So you do your question at the top and the answers below, and then continue on the narrative in that same level, and then the questions below again. Okay, so I'm just going to pass you back now to Lisa. Thank you.
Kevin, that is great. Thank you very much. What an in-depth demo of the branching component. And it's just to say as well, the session is being recorded this morning. So each of our attendees from today will be getting a link to that along with Lindsey's presentation too. So I just want to do a quick, just following on what Kevin's talked about, to get a feel about how people see the branching component affecting them. So what we're asking here is, what benefits do you see the branching component bringing to your kind of learning creation? So we'll give that a few 15 seconds or so. We've had a flurry of questions coming in as well. I'm just kind of conscious of time. What we'll do is make sure that we'll do our best to answer as many as we can live by Kevin and Lindsey. Any that we don't get to, we'll wrap those up into a handy kind of learning document, so you can see and get an idea of other questions people have been asking this morning that maybe you didn't kind of think to ask, and everyone can learn from it. So what we have here now, let's close that poll. Get Lindsey, if you can hear us, get Lindsey's take on it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Lisa. Yeah, I think as we'd expect, all of them have scored fairly highly. Actually, I would have expected the middle one to be a bit higher, the potential for learner to retain information for longer. One of the really good things about being able to practice things is it brings in, probably a bit early, but a little bit of the space practice, so there's actually doing it. So it's really that kind of, if you show someone something, it's not actually that likely they'll remember it. I can't remember the exact percentages, but if they actually then go on and try it for themselves, actually the leap from what they will remember is much higher. So hopefully I would say that middle one, yeah, equally I would have expected it to be quite high. But I think you're all correct in that all of these are hopefully kind of the benefits of well-written branching scenarios, really. So yeah, that's great.
Great stuff. And just while I have you as well, Katie has asked, do you have any tips for best practice when writing scenarios?
I guess there's a couple of key things really. I mean, I think the main one is really focusing on the learning point that you're trying to get across. So if you use that as the core of what you're writing, then it will stop you kind of wandering off into different areas and kind of just getting, it's very easy, or I find it quite easy because I like writing stories, to get sucked into making the story amazing, but actually forgetting that the purpose of it is to get the learning points across. So if you really make sure that you know what those are at the beginning and what you want your learner to have learned by the end of it, then that will really help you focus. And I think the other thing is kind of not having additional information, so keep it quite short, quite sharp, just so that you're giving them the real key information they need. Sometimes you need a bit of extra information to kind of make it slightly more complex and therefore more real, I guess. And also sometimes it's nice to put a bit of humour in there. It's nice to kind of get people to think in a slightly different way and to look at things in a different way. So I think they're probably the key things. But as I said, if people are interested, let us know and we can maybe look in more depth at how you can write kind of more complex scenarios
Yes.
and for use in the branching component.
Great, Lindsay. And we'll also be sharing your presentation, Lindsay, with the links that you have in there with kind of other delegates, so there's resources they can use. Okay, Kevin's going to answer a few questions for us as well.
Hi, so as I said, we've just had a few questions in. I see Stu Bailey's asked, does the branching scenarios allow you to use video in each section? And absolutely it does. As I demonstrated, you can add any media to any of those sections without any problems at all. There were a few queries there. I'm just going to jump back here. Basically, people were asking if they could see what it looks like on mobile size. So I'm just going to jump back to the preview here and let you see what that looks like. Second here. So here's the scenario that we had created, and I'm just going to resize this down to mobile. Now, currently we have this set to display as full width, but that would actually be overridden at mobile level. It wouldn't matter whether you have this at full width or if you were displaying it with the scenario on the left and the questions on the right. The way this will format is that you'll get the scenario first, then the image, and then you'll be presented with the questions. And then when you answer, on a mobile, that'll work much more responsibly and actually take you to the top of that question. But essentially, it'll just give you the scenario, the image, and then the actual question underneath to do that. So it's a little bit difficult to show that fully in a mobile when we're doing it on desktop, but it will work in much the same way. So there was a question there as well from Bob Price about asking if we can format the text in the blocks for the responses. At the moment, the item text doesn't have a full HTML editor, but it is possible to use some code in there to format that. A lot of the style in there is probably going to come from the actual theme, the theme itself, and that will be more defined based on the theme you're using. But it is something that I think will be quite nice to possibly add HTML editor in there, and I know we have discussed it with the development team, so it may be possible that will be added at a later stage. So I'm just going to do one more question here. Let's see. So there was a question there just asking about if we can customize the colors displayed and where images sit on the page. So again, this kind of comes down to the actual theme and the classes you've used within that theme. So it is possible to customize some of the colors that appear. For example, on this scenario here, this text has just come through as blue. That's just the way this theme's been built. But with the HTML editor, you can actually modify that to change the text to any color you want. The actual top of the scenario here is the dark blue, which is again pulled through from the color class and can be modified. Now at the moment, the actual question has this default blue color. However, we are actually updating that, so that's also going to be pulled through from the color class to give you more flexibility and actually modifying that as and when you wish. Okay, so I'm just going to pass you back now to Lisa.
That's great, Kevin. Thank you as well, Lindsay. Just conscious to have Jim and Harry and Pete. We do have your questions here. Like I said, we will document answers to those and share with you as well. So thank you to everyone for their questions. It's been another kind of popular webinar as well. It's great to see such an interest of ADAPT coming in. So that's it, folks. Before we wrap up, there's a few things I want to make you aware of. A link, like I said, to a recording of this webinar and any accompanying resources will be hitting your inbox as a follow-up to today's session. Feel free to share those resources as well amongst your team and colleagues. And you'll see in the chat box there, I've shared a link to Learning Pool's roadmap, so it gives you kind of an insight into kind of what's coming down the tracks in terms of what our plans for Adapt Learning and Adapt Builder are. Also watch www.learningpool.com for future news of our webinars as they happen throughout 2016. Some really interesting ones there in the pipeline. There may be a possibility that some of you are going to Learning Technologies on the 3rd and 4th of February in London. Don't forget, if you're there, please do call by stand C21 to meet the Learning Pool crew and maybe test drive some of our latest technologies. So all that remains is to thank you all on behalf of Lindsey, Kevin and myself for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at future learning hours. Thank you.